What if a single symbol could unlock forbidden knowledge hidden since the dawn of civilization? Why does the same sigil appear in medieval grimoires, royal architecture, and even modern art? Could Lucifer's mark be less about evil and more about enlightenment? What secrets did ancient mystics protect behind its geometric design? And why do some claim the sigil still calls to those who dare to look too closely? In the dim corners of forgotten libraries and the basements of ancient cathedrals lies a symbol whispered to hold the power of rebellion itself, the Sigil of Lucifer. Sharp, elegant, and mathematical in its perfection, it has haunted humankind's imagination for centuries. Those who have gazed upon it describe an inexplicable pull, as if the lines themselves breathe, forming a map between light and darkness. But where did it truly begin? Not in the fires of hell, as legends might tell, but in the pages of human curiosity, drawn by seekers hungry for forbidden wisdom. Its design is deceptively simple, an inverted triangle beneath a double X, intersecting lines forming a chalice-like pattern. Yet every angle and cross has been debated by mystics, mathematicians, and occult scholars alike. Some say it reflects the descent of divine light into the human realm. Others claim it was created as an alchemical cipher, representing the merging of intellect and temptation. Throughout history, secret societies and heretical thinkers have whispered its name, not as a call to darkness, but as an invocation of enlightenment denied by dogma. The earliest known form of the sigil appears not in Christian texts, but in grimoires of the 16th century, most notably in the Grimorium Verum, a forbidden book that promised direct communion with celestial and infernal forces. Yet even before its publication, symbols resembling it adorned the talismans of Gnostic priests and Hermetic philosophers. Could it be that the mark of Lucifer predates the very myth of Lucifer himself? Or was it the myth that arose to explain the power people sensed in those ancient lines? The question remains unresolved, echoing like a whisper through centuries. To understand the Sigil of Lucifer, we must first understand the archetype behind it. Lucifer means light-bearer, the bringer of dawn, once a title of the planet Venus before it fell into theological infamy. In Roman myth, it was a name of beauty, not blasphemy, associated with hope, brilliance, and renewal. Only later did it become fused with the image of the fallen angel, condemned for his defiance. And perhaps therein lies the symbol's power. It stands as the eternal paradox, the bridge between illumination and rebellion, divinity and defiance. Through centuries of religious transformation, the sigil evolved, carrying with it both fear and fascination. In medieval Europe, to draw or even glimpse it was to risk accusation of heresy. Yet behind closed doors, alchemists carved it into copper discs, whispering prayers to the morning star for knowledge beyond the church's grasp. They saw Lucifer not as a fiend, but as the first thinker, the spirit who dared to ask why. The sigil became their silent salute to curiosity, a coded emblem for those who refused blind faith and sought understanding through reason. But the sigil's geometry hides deeper meaning. The inverted triangle at its base points downward, toward matter, the physical, the human. The double cross above symbolizes spirit, intellect, and willpower. Together, they depict the descent of the divine into the world, a message that enlightenment can be found not by rejecting flesh, but by embracing the full spectrum of being. For some, it is a roadmap of inner ascension, from ignorance to awareness, from shadow to flame. For others, it is a warning that knowledge always comes with a price. As centuries passed, whispers of the sigil spread across Europe, finding refuge among scholars, magicians, and rebels. During the Renaissance, artists began embedding its shape subtly within their paintings, hiding it in cathedral frescoes and royal insignias. To the untrained eye, it was mere ornamentation. To initiates, it was the secret sign of the illuminated mind. In Florence, a scholar was burned at the stake for possessing a ring engraved with its form. Yet even his ashes could not extinguish the symbol. It continued to reappear, as if the idea it represented could never truly be destroyed. In the 19th century, with the rise of occult revival movements like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the sigil gained new interpretations. Some magicians saw it as a personal seal of empowerment, a declaration of self-sovereignty in a world ruled by conformity. Artists and poets began reimagining Lucifer as the misunderstood liberator, symbol of intellect over obedience. The sigil became not a mark of evil, but of individuality, echoing the era's thirst for self-realization. Its lines no longer whispered of damnation, but of awakening, the courage to question everything. Yet even today, the sigil's true origins remain shrouded in debate. Some claim it is purely a Renaissance creation, born from ceremonial magic. Others insist it traces back to far older traditions, the star glyphs of Babylon, the sacred geometries of Egypt, or even pre-Christian mystery cults that worshipped light in its purest show form. Each theory adds another layer to its mystique. Could it be that the sigil is less a symbol of a being and more a universal cipher, an ancient diagram of cosmic duality, resurfacing whenever humanity hungers for forbidden truth? And perhaps that is why it endures. The Sigil of Lucifer is not simply a mark etched on paper. It is a mirror held up to the man's spirit. It challenges us to confront the boundaries of belief, to walk the knife's edge between faith and reason. To look upon it is to ask oneself a dangerous question. What if the pursuit of knowledge, the very act of seeking light, is the truest rebellion of all? The answer, as always, lies hidden in its lines, waiting for those brave enough to see. Some scholars claim that the Sigil of Lucifer was not the invention of a single magician, but a synthesis, an inheritance of forgotten diagrams once guarded by the architects of sacred geometry. Within the halls of Alexandria, it is said that geomancers and philosophers gathered under flickering oil lamps, translating the cosmic order into lines and ratios. The inverted triangle, for instance, mirrors the symbol for water, fluid, emotional, receptive, while the intersecting crosses mirror fire and air. Together, they represent the balance of opposites, the eternal union of chaos and creation, light and shadow. Yet who first dared to name it Lucifer's? In the dusty margins of the Clavicula Salomonis and the Ars Goetia, strange sigils flicker like coded constellations. While most bear the names of demons or celestial spirits, one stands apart, elegant, symmetrical, defiant. It was not a seal for summoning, but a seal for understanding. Some researchers believe it may have been a scholar's attempt to graphically represent the very concept of illumination, Lucifer as archetype, not entity. In that sense, the sigil became both shield and sword, a protection against ignorance and a weapon against the tyranny of unquestioned belief. By the 17th century, the symbol had taken on a more subversive meaning. Secret enclaves of philosophers in France, Prague, and London began using it as a hidden watermark on their manuscripts. To them, it was an emblem of intellectual freedom, not diabolism. Yet the Church saw it differently. To the Inquisition, any mark resembling an inverted triangle or double cross was suspect, a blasphemous perversion of divine order. Dozens of thinkers vanished under accusation, their works burned, their names erased. The Sigil of Lucifer became a ghost, a forbidden geometry whispered only in candlelight. Legends tell of an alchemist in Venice, Armand de Lucre, who claimed to have found the sigil's true key. He wrote that each line corresponded to a planetary alignment, and that by tracing it under the right lunar phase, one could awaken the inner light of the morning star. His experiments ended abruptly. Records state he was found burned, though his manuscript survived unscathed. Some say the sigil reacted. Others believe his own brilliance consumed him. His notebooks, now lost, became the foundation of many later occult traditions, from theosophy to Luciferian mysticism. The myth only deepened. It is perhaps ironic that Lucifer's sigil rose to prominence during humanity's darkest ages. In times of censorship and fear, symbols become weapons of expression. The inverted triangle, once sacred, was condemned. The double cross, once royal, became rebellious. To draw the sigil was to declare allegiance not to the devil, but to the search for forbidden truth. Artists hid it in frescoes. Composers embedded its geometry in symphonies. It became a protest coded in mathematics, a way for visionaries to preserve light beneath the weight of ignorance. That quiet defiance birthed legends still alive today. By the dawn of the Enlightenment, when science began to challenge scripture, the sigil returned again, this time reinterpreted through the lens of philosophy. Thinkers like Voltaire and Goethe spoke of Lucifer not as a fallen angel, but as the spark of human intellect. Some believed the sigil represented that very flame, a mathematical metaphor for the human soul's rebellion against darkness. Paintings from the era often depict a faint, triangular motif hidden behind images of Venus or Prometheus. Each brushstroke whispered the same truth, that enlightenment, though dangerous, is the truest act of creation. The 19th century brought fascination with the occult revival, and with it, the sigil stepped back into the open. French esotericist Eliphas Lévy speculated that the symbol embodied both microcosm and macrocosm, man reflecting the universe. His writings inspired Aleister Crowley, who later reimagined Lucifer not as Satan, but as the archetype of light unchained. Within such circles, the sigil was redrawn, polished, and adorned in ritual. Yet its essence remained untouched. Those who invoked it claimed it wasn't a summoning tool. It was a mirror. To gaze upon it was to confront the part of oneself that seeks knowledge at any cost. Even today, mystery clings to it like incense. In hidden libraries and secret archives, researchers have discovered versions of the sigil inscribed upon brass, parchment, even stone. Some bear runic inscriptions, others bear Latin phrases translating to "let there be light." The variety suggests the sigil was less a singular mark and more an evolving code, a philosophical language shared across centuries. Modern occultists claim that meditating on its shape can awaken latent awareness, a sense of purpose, clarity, or even rebellion. Whether psychological or mystical, its effect on the human mind remains undeniable. But there is another layer rarely discussed: the sigil's mathematical perfection. When studied geometrically, its proportions correspond to the golden ratio, a formula found in everything from seashells to galaxies. Coincidence or intention? Scholars of sacred geometry argue that such precision cannot be accidental. The sigil, they say, encodes the universal balance between expansion and collapse, order and entropy. Its very design mirrors the heartbeat of creation, the rhythm of rise and fall, light and darkness. Could it be that the symbol itself is not infernal at all, but divine in disguise? And perhaps that is the greatest secret of the Sigil of Lucifer. It has always been misunderstood. It was never simply a mark of evil, but a sigil of illumination, an ancient map of human consciousness. To some, it remains a dangerous heresy. To others, it is a forgotten truth. Yet through every era, one thing endures. The sigil calls to those who question, those who seek beyond the veil, those who dare to believe that even in the depths of shadow, light is waiting to be found. In the heart of Victorian London, amid gaslight fog and whispers of spiritualism, the Sigil of Lucifer resurfaced once again, this time under the guise of academic inquiry. Secret societies flourished in candlelit parlors, their members a strange blend of scholars, mystics, and poets. Among them was Helena Blavatsky, whose Theosophical Society sought to merge Eastern mysticism with Western esotericism. Though she never explicitly used the sigil, her writings on the Luciferian spirit of knowledge inspired others to resurrect it. It became a quiet emblem of inner liberation, a challenge to both church and conformity. One such group, the Order of the Morning Star, is said to have adopted the sigil as its central seal. They believed it represented not the devil, but humanity's ascent from ignorance to enlightenment. Meetings were held at midnight, candles forming a circle around the sigil carved into marble. Each initiation ended with the same vow: to seek light, even when light burns. Rumors spread that their rituals summoned visions, glimpses of an ancient presence watching from beyond. Authorities dismissed it as hysteria, yet witnesses claimed the symbol glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. In art, the sigil began to appear subtly, etched into the folds of sculpture, hidden beneath paint in pre-Raphaelite works. Dante Gabriel Rossetti's journals mention the mark of the morning star, describing it as the geometry of rebellion. Musicians too whispered of its influence. Composers claimed that tracing the sigil before performance heightened inspiration, unlocking melodies from some unseen source. Whether psychological or supernatural, none could deny its power. The sigil had transcended religion, becoming a vessel for creativity itself, a silent muse for those willing to dance with forbidden ideas. Yet, as with all symbols of liberation, the sigil carried danger. The more it spread, the more it attracted those who misused it. Fringe cults twisted its meaning into something darker, seeing in its lines not knowledge but domination. Rituals became distorted, invoking not enlightenment but control. By the early 20th century, the sigil's reputation had split entirely. To some, it was a torch. To others, a trap. The duality was fitting, for Lucifer's myth had always been both savior and deceiver, light-bearer and tempter, two truths entwined like the cross within the triangle. As the century advanced, the sigil migrated into new mediums. Occult publishers reprinted its image in shadowy grimoires. Avant-garde filmmakers used it as a visual motif for rebellion against authority. Meanwhile, historians unearthed older versions carved into forgotten catacombs beneath Rome and Constantinople. The imagery was consistent, same lines, same symmetry, centuries apart. Such discovery reignited speculation. Was the sigil an archetype buried within the human psyche, surfacing whenever civilization reached a turning point? Could it be that humanity itself carries the memory of this symbol, coded in consciousness like a genetic whisper? During World War II, strange reports emerged from Europe's esoteric undercurrents. Both Axis and Allied intelligence noted secret experiments involving ancient symbols, attempts to harness psychological influence through geometry and myth. Among the recovered documents were sketches unmistakably similar to the Sigil of Lucifer. The irony was chilling. A symbol once meant to inspire enlightenment was being studied for manipulation. In those years of darkness, the sigil's meaning inverted once again. It became the perfect metaphor for humanity's endless struggle, our capacity to twist even the light of knowledge into instruments of destruction. After the war, as the world rebuilt, the sigil retreated underground once more. It found refuge in the fringes of art, philosophy, and the rising counterculture. Beat poets wrote verses about the morning star's mark. Surrealists hid it in paintings as protest against conformity. The 1960s saw a revival of interest in personal spirituality and rebellion, and with it, Lucifer returned as symbol, not of evil, but of questioning. The sigil appeared on album covers, murals, and occult literature, each instance rekindling the same debate: was it heresy or enlightenment, sin or self-knowledge? In the decades that followed, digital subcultures discovered the sigil anew. Online forums, drenched in aesthetic mystery, shared its image alongside theories, connecting it to quantum metaphysics, chaos magic, and ancient alien symbology. Some claimed the design mirrored neural pathways of the human brain. Others insisted it resonated with specific frequency patterns when drawn geometrically precise. The convergence of mysticism and science gave the symbol renewed vitality. In an age drowning in information, the sigil once again stood for what it always had: the pursuit of knowledge beyond permission. But as its popularity surged, so too did misunderstanding. Social media and pop culture reduced the sigil to shock value, tattoos, t-shirts, and movie props stripped of depth. The once sacred geometry of introspection became commercial rebellion. Yet beneath the noise, a quiet current persisted. Those who studied its origins, meditated on its proportions, and felt something stir within. They understood what others missed, that the sigil's true power was not in worship or fear, but in reflection. To engage with it sincerely was to confront one's own inner fire, the forbidden flame of awareness. And so the sigil endures, suspended between worlds, sacred and profane, feared and revered. To some, it is still the devil's brand. To others, the philosopher's seal. But to those who look beyond, who feel its geometry hum with meaning, it is something more profound, a riddle written across time, daring humanity to decode its message. The Sigil of Lucifer is not a promise of darkness, it is an invitation to illumination. The question it asks has never changed. When offered the flame of truth, will you reach for it, or turn away into comforting shadow? As the 20th century matured, historians began to treat the sigil less as an instrument of ritual and more as a cultural mirror. Anthropologists noted that every civilization invents a graphic shorthand for its forbidden questions. The Egyptians had the Eye of Ra, the Norse their runic staves, the Renaissance its complex monograms of alchemy. In that lineage, the Sigil of Lucifer simply represented Europe's confrontation with authority. It was geometry turned protest, an emblem through which artists, philosophers, and freethinkers negotiated the boundary between sanctioned belief and intellectual independence. Psychologists of the post-war era found another layer. Carl Jung's followers compared the sigil to what he called the shadow archetype, the part of the human psyche that holds unacknowledged creativity and doubt. To trace the sigil, they argued, was to enact the drama of individuation, confronting one's darkness to reclaim inner light. In this framework, Lucifer was not a being but a metaphor for consciousness evolving through rebellion. The symbol's enduring fascination, therefore, lay not in evil but in self-discovery, a coded reminder that knowledge requires the courage to question inherited truth. Art historians mapped its migration through visual culture. In surrealist canvases, the inverted triangle reappeared disguised as architectural motifs. In modern graphic design, echoes of its symmetry surfaced in logos and stage lighting. Directors used it as shorthand for intellectual temptation, a visual cue that a character was defying convention. Even fashion appropriated its sharp geometry to suggest avant-garde confidence. The result was a paradox. A mark once condemned as taboo had become a universal language for innovation, the aesthetic of the outsider who dares to imagine differently. Academia joined the conversation in the 1970s, when symbologists began dissecting the figure mathematically. They observed its correspondence to the golden ratio and to Pythagorean triangles, seeing in it the same proportions that guide cathedral spires and musical harmonics. This finding reframed the sigil as part of a long continuum of sacred geometry rather than a break from it. The lines that once signified rebellion now also revealed harmony, a reminder that reason and mystery often share the same blueprint. The scholar's compass had replaced the magician's circle, yet both traced identical truths. By the 1980s, cultural critics viewed the sigil through sociology. They linked its periodic resurgences to times of mass anxiety, eras when authority felt brittle and people sought symbols of autonomy. The emblem, they said, functioned as psychological counter. Weight to institutional power. Its simplicity made it reproducible. Its ambiguity made it safe for projection. To one viewer it signified liberation, to another danger. In that tension lay its magnetism. The sigil's endurance thus became evidence not of cultic survival, but of humanity's recurring need to visualize dissent. Digital anthropology now tracks its journey through cyberspace. When scanned by pattern recognition algorithms, the sigil's geometry appears in unexpected contexts: architectural plans, electronic circuit diagrams, even social network graphs. Scholars use these coincidences to illustrate how the same mathematical forms underlie both human expression and technology. The modern fascination is therefore less about demonology than about symmetry, the instinctive comfort we take in balanced opposition, light and shadow, input and output, liberty and order, all reduced to intersecting lines that continue to hypnotize the collective imagination. Neuroscientists, too, have entered the discussion. Eye-tracking studies show that viewers linger longer on symbols with inverted symmetry, finding them simultaneously unsettling and beautiful. The sigil exemplifies this cognitive tension. Our brains crave equilibrium yet recoil from inversion. That micro-conflict provokes curiosity, the same sensation that kept the symbol alive for centuries. Far from being a tool of invocation, it is a masterclass in visual psychology, demonstrating how line and proportion can evoke awe, fear, and contemplation without a single word of doctrine. In popular culture of the 21st century, filmmakers and designers exploit that psychology deliberately. The sigil appears in thrillers, music videos, and graphic novels as shorthand for forbidden intelligence. Viewers may not know its history, but they feel its charge, the allure of questioning, the pulse of mystery. When placed beside digital rain or flickering code, it becomes the emblem of the hacker's spirit, the eternal outsider decoding hidden systems. Thus, the symbol has migrated once more from parchment to pixels, maintaining the same narrative role it held in monasteries and secret salons. Museologists and curators now exhibit the sigil alongside other emblems of intellectual resistance. They frame it within the timeline of human curiosity, from the Renaissance pursuit of reason to the modern struggle for creative autonomy. Visitors leave less intrigued by darkness than by design, the precision of its geometry, the story of its transformation from curse to curiosity. Each exhibition reminds audiences that symbols evolve as society does. What once terrified becomes tomorrow's thesis topic. The sigil, stripped of superstition, stands as testimony to humanity's endless redefinition of light. Today, historians summarize its journey succinctly. A once feared emblem that survived by adapting to new languages of meaning. In academic journals, it is cited not as proof of occult lineage, but as evidence of the persistence of archetypes. The sigil's power, they conclude, lies in ambiguity, the quality that keeps art, philosophy, and science forever in dialogue. Whether inscribed on vellum or rendered in digital vectors, it continues to whisper the same challenge. That knowledge, however uncomfortable, remains the oldest form of illumination humanity knows. Across the millennia, the sigil's geometry has migrated from carved stone to coded light. In ancient temples, artisans etched its forerunners into bronze and clay. Today, designers unknowingly echo its lines in circuits and data visualizations. Historians note that this continuity reveals more than coincidence. It speaks to an instinctive human habit of giving form to paradox. Where early mystics saw spirit descending into matter, modern physicists glimpse symmetry breaking, entropy, birthing order. Each generation rediscovers the same truth within different language. That knowledge, once drawn, never truly disappears, it only changes medium. Digital humanists have traced the sigil's outlines within the algorithms of modern design software. The triangular ratios correspond uncannily with the default grids used in animation, architecture, even interface icons. This convergence has led researchers to call it the accidental archetype of modern aesthetics. What once symbolized forbidden inquiry now underlies the everyday screens through which inquiry flows. The paradox is poetic. The mark that once condemned thinkers for defiance now powers the devices that connect billions in collective curiosity, a silent reconciliation between the torch and the network. In virtual art communities, creators remix the sigil into motion graphics that shimmer like constellations. They treat it not as a relic, but as a lens through which to explore identity in the digital age. For many, its inverted triangle becomes a metaphor for inversion of norms, gender, politics, belief. The double cross translates as connection, intersecting nodes, shared signals, the web itself. Scholars observing this trend argue that the sigil has become post-religious myth, a symbol of information's dual edge, liberating yet overwhelming, promising illumination while demanding vigilance. Meanwhile, archaeologists continue unearthing the past. In Mesopotamian dig sites, fragments of bronze discs display intersecting lines resembling early geometric talismans. Though unrelated by doctrine, their proportions echo the same mathematical heartbeat later codified in Renaissance occult diagrams. The continuum fascinates scientists. From stargazing priests mapping Venus to programmers mapping data, the same triangular logic persists. The sigil thus functions as a bridge, linking the tactile world of clay tablets to the invisible arc. Architecture of code, a reminder that every era translates wonder into its own technology. Cognitive historians propose that symbols like the sigil endure because they mirror neural architecture. The human brain, with its branching dendrites and crossing synapses, favors symmetry punctuated by disruption. The sigil's balanced yet inverted form stimulates that recognition. Ancient scribes interpreted the response as divine. Modern neuroscience calls it pattern-seeking reward. Both perspectives describe awe, the flash when comprehension meets mystery. In that sense, the sigil's survival is less about belief than biology, a design our minds cannot forget, encoded in perception itself. Museums now curate exhibitions pairing early manuscripts with holographic projections. Visitors stand before illuminated replicas, while augmented reality overlays reveal geometric ratios and historical timelines. As they move, sensors cause the lines to rotate, merging medieval ink with digital light. Curators describe the odd experience as dialogue across centuries. The goal is not to venerate the symbol, but to watch its evolution, how an emblem of secrecy became an open study of human imagination. The display closes with a single phrase: "Every age redraws its own Lucifer." The crowd leaves silent, thoughtful. In academic conferences, theologians and technologists occasionally share panels discussing the sigil's irony, that a mark once feared for challenging divine hierarchy now represents humankind's creative hierarchy, our capacity to invent meaning. Some draw parallels between the mythic fall and the modern pursuit of artificial intelligence, the wish to replicate light itself, to create knowledge independent of its maker. The sigil becomes metaphor once more, a diagram of aspiration and consequence, of ascent disguised as descent. Its angles remind us that innovation and hubris often trace the same slope. Contemporary psychologists use it in seminars about personal transformation. They invite participants to sketch the shape while reflecting on moments of resistance in their lives. The exercise reframes rebellion as growth, the downward point as descent into self-doubt, the crossing lines as synthesis, the upward return as newfound clarity. Without invoking dogma, the practice converts ancient symbolism into modern mindfulness. What was once a seal of exclusion becomes a tool for empathy, teaching that enlightenment often begins in discomfort, the very insight that fueled the sigil's earliest interpretations. In cinema, the sigil appears not as an omen, but as narrative device. Directors position it behind protagonists who question systems, suggesting continuity between mythic and modern rebels. The audience may not recognize the reference, yet instinctively senses its tension. Each appearance renews the symbol's mystique, keeping it alive through storytelling rather than ritual. Critics call this the Luciferian aesthetic, not worship, but the celebration of intellectual defiance as art form. Through frame and light, filmmakers translate centuries of discourse into a 2-second glimpse that still unsettles and inspires. And so, the sigil endures into the information age as both relic and algorithm, a graphic fossil of humanity's dialogue with knowledge. Its lines, once carved in secrecy, now glow on global screens, inviting reflection rather than fear. From temple wall to tablet, parchment to pixel, it has never ceased to ask the same question. How far will we go in pursuit of understanding? The answer, written in every age's hand, remains constant. We reach, we fall, we rise, and in the geometry of that cycle, the sigil simply smiles back. Across history, every age invents its own forbidden symbol. What changes is not the design, but the meaning humanity pours into it. The same geometry that once hinted at cosmic order now glows on microchips. The same motto of liberation once whispered in secret societies now scrolls across social feeds. Our relationship with the symbols has evolved from worship to participation. We no longer carve them into stone. We animate them, remix them, send them viral. Yet behind each transformation lies the same question. When we create signs of rebellion, do we guide progress or tempt chaos? Modern ethicists see this duality reflected in the digital world. The logo of a startup, the badge of a movement, even an emoji can carry the weight of philosophy. Symbols travel faster than ideas, often outpacing the context that gives them sense. A mark meant to signal awareness may ignite outrage. An icon of resistance can be commercialized overnight. Technology magnifies intention and distortion alike. As algorithms learn what captures attention, they unknowingly become new priests of meaning, deciding which modern sigils flourish and which vanish into data dust. In this tension between creation and control, humanity rediscovers the ancient drama of enlightenment and restraint. Artificial intelligence researchers debate whether self-learning systems mirror the mythic act of reaching for forbidden knowledge. Engineers speak of alignment in tones once reserved for morality. Philosophers answer with questions about digital conscience. Our devices, in essence, are mirrors polished by code. They reflect our hunger for understanding, our impatience with limits, and our recurring hope that knowledge itself can be pure. Yet purity, history reminds us, has always been the most fragile illusion. Artists translate that dilemma into image and sound. On streaming platforms, experimental filmmakers layer modern circuitry over medieval manuscripts, composing visual sermons on curiosity and control. Galleries project holographic symbols that respond to visitors' heartbeats, turning the audience into co-authors. The effect is both thrilling and unsettling. The viewer senses the ancient pulse of awe inside contemporary light. Critics call it techno-mythology, a space where art tests ethics and emotion becomes the final measure of truth. In such exhibitions, rebellion is not destruction, but dialogue. Educators, too, have begun using symbolic analysis to teach media literacy. By tracing the life cycle of an emblem, from sacred seal to corporate logo, they reveal how meaning mutates across contexts. Students learn that every symbol is a contract between creator and observer, upheld by interpretation. The lesson extends beyond aesthetics. Understand your symbols, and you understand your society. Whether in political branding or social activism, the same shapes that once decorated temples now mobilize millions, proving that the language of rebellion never truly sleeps. Philosophers describe this era as the democratization of myth. Once, only priests or kings could commission icons. Now, anyone with a touchscreen can forge one. The responsibility that accompanies this power is immense. When a gesture, meme, or design becomes emblematic, it can inspire progress or polarization. The frontier between freedom and manipulation grows thinner with every repost. And so, the new ethic of creativity demands mindfulness. Before launching a symbol into the world, ask not only what it means, but what it might become once others believe in it. Historians see optimism in this self-awareness. They argue that society's current fascination with transparency, the insistence on open data, verifiable truth, visible process, is itself a modern sigil of light. It reflects a collective desire to ensure that knowledge, however complex, remains accountable. Where secrecy once gave, symbols their power, today clarity does. The screen replaces the altar, yet the ritual is familiar. Gather, observe, interpret, and hope that what we reveal does more good than harm. It is, in many ways, the oldest ceremony repeated in new syntax. Psychologists remind us that rebellion need not be loud to be transformative. Quiet dissent, rethinking a habit, challenging a bias, designing technology for empathy creates ripples that outlast slogans. In therapy and coaching, the act of redrawing a personal symbol often marks the turning point between confusion and purpose. The geometry of change remains constant: descent into doubt, intersection of insight, ascent into clarity. Whether sketched on paper or coded in silicon, this pattern defines how humans grow. Our symbols record it, our stories retell it. Sociologists predict that the next frontier of ethics will involve collaboration between artists, engineers, and philosophers, a trinity once divided by discipline. As artificial intelligence learns to generate icons and language autonomously, humanity must decide what values those creations embody. The challenge will not be preventing machines from making symbols, but ensuring the meanings they project still align with compassion, curiosity, and responsibility. In this shared authorship lies both promise and peril. The possibility that technology, guided by conscience, may finally reconcile power with wisdom. And so, as the 21st century advances, the human story circles back to its beginning, a tale of lines, light, and longing. Symbols remain our mirrors, reflecting both the brilliance and blindness of their makers. The ancient impulse to draw the invisible has not faded. It has multiplied, pixel by pixel. In every gesture of design, we still trace the eternal dialogue between knowledge and humility. Wabiyu. Whether carved in stone or rendered in code, the message endures. Enlightenment is never given. It is chosen, shaped, and carried by those who dare to imagine it anew. As the 21st century deepens, the human eye grows more accustomed to abstraction. Symbols no longer dwell solely on paper or screens. They shimmer in augmented reality, hover over streets, pulse on wristbands that monitor our heartbeats. Futurists argue that the next language of meaning will not be written but worn, encoded in interfaces that adapt to emotion. Yet the principle remains ancient: geometry as story, design as philosophy. The shapes that once whispered through myth now whisper through circuitry, asking the same ageless question: what does it mean to be aware? In design studios across the world, architects and programmers consult historians while sketching new emblems for sustainability, equity, and exploration. Their mood boards show echoes of antiquity: spirals for growth, triangles for balance, intersecting lines for collaboration. The goal is not nostalgia, but resonance. A symbol that feels timeless invites trust. It anchors innovation in continuity. Every line becomes a negotiation between memory and vision, proof that progress does not erase the past. It converses with it, borrowing its grammar to describe a future still undefined. Digital culture theorists foresee a coming age of meta-symbolism, where artificial intelligence will help translate moral and cultural complexity into visual form. Instead of one universal logo, societies may cultivate living symbols that evolve through public consensus. They will shift colors with environmental data, alter shape with social sentiment, reflect the collective mood of humanity in real time. This dynamic symbolism may restore what earlier ages called sacred, the sense that our shared signs breathe with us, mirroring not gods but the pulse of civilization itself. Meanwhile, anthropologists document how younger generations reinterpret ancient emblems as tools of inclusion. Patterns once feared as secret now appear on protest. Banners, album art, and digital avatars. What unites these uses is intent, the reclaiming of language once monopolized by hierarchy. For them, the act of redesigning an old sign becomes democratic ritual. It declares that meaning belongs to everyone, that history's forbidden shapes can be repurposed to represent empathy, equality, or climate stewardship. In their hands, rebellion matures into restoration. Technology companies, sensing this shift, invest in semiotics research alongside product development. They recognize that the next frontier of human-computer interaction is emotional literacy. A well-crafted icon can soothe, empower, or warn more effectively than text. To design responsibly, they study how archetypes influence behavior. The lesson from centuries of symbol making is clear. Every image carries ethical weight. Whether a warning sign or a corporate logo, each must answer the question artists once posed in monasteries. What emotion will this shape awaken, and at what cost? In virtual reality classrooms, students now walk through the timeline of symbolism as if through a living museum. They stand beneath floating hieroglyphs, pass digital mosaics of Renaissance geometry, and arrive in a dome where modern data visualizations swirl like constellations. The experience collapses millennia into minutes, revealing continuity amid chaos. Teachers report that the exercise fosters humility. Learners grasp how humanity's greatest leaps were guided as much by imagination as by reason. In the glow of simulated starlight, they sense the old awe once reserved for temples and cathedrals. Philosophers of technology describe this convergence as the return of wonder. After decade days of analytical detachment, society rediscovers reverence, not for mystery's fear, but for its beauty. In conferences and think tanks, ethicists quote poets, engineers cite historians. The barriers between science and art dissolve under the realization that both seek coherence in complexity. Symbols become shared ground where logic and metaphor meet. The future of knowledge, they suggest, will not banish myth but refine it, turning legend into language for the systems that now govern our lives. Cultural diplomats explore how shared symbols might ease global tension. Projects such as the World Glyph Initiative aim to design emblems that represent universal values, peace through cooperation, responsibility toward Earth, curiosity without conquest. Each proposed mark draws from multiple traditions, ensuring no single culture dominates. The process itself becomes ceremony, sketch, debate, redesign. In a fractured world, these collaborative creations serve as proof that dialogue is possible. The act of drawing together becomes diplomacy rendered in line and light. Psychologists studying collective identity note that even in hyper-connected societies, individuals crave belonging expressed through imagery. Digital tribes form around icons, environmental circles, equality stripes, science spirals that function much like medieval banners. What distinguishes the present is transparency. Affiliations shift fluidly. Icons evolve openly. People choose symbols the way ancestors chose stories to locate themselves in meaning. This visual literacy may become the foundation of future ethics, where understanding another's emblem equates to understanding their humanity. As our century approaches its middle decades, the conversation about symbols circles back to its starting point, the relationship between light, knowledge, and responsibility. Technically, it can now generate infinite signs, but interpretation remains human. Each image we project on walls, screens, or the sky itself asks us to decide what kind of civilization we wish to be. In that decision lies continuity with every artist, scribe, and thinker before us. The shapes change, but the purpose endures. To capture wonder without surrendering wisdom, to design the visible from the invisible once more. As humankind looks upward again, symbols accompany every launch. Each mission patch, each banner on a rocket fuselage, compresses vast ambition into one design. Astronauts describe these emblems as personal compasses, reminders that exploration is not only about distance but direction. The circle around a star, the line, piercing vacuum, the initials of a new world, all repeat ancient motifs of ascent. Where cavemen painted constellations on stone, engineers now etch them on titanium. The message is identical across millennia. We seek, therefore, we exist. Space agencies collaborate with artists to craft visual languages that transcend translation. A symbol meant to be recognized by future civilizations must outlast language, politics, and even species. Researchers test materials that can endure cosmic radiation for millennia, embedding pictograms of DNA, peace, and planetary maps. They call these artifacts semantic seeds. In sending them outward, humanity acknowledges two audiences: any who might find them, and our own descendants, who may need to remember what hope once looked like carved into metal. Astrobiologists argue that symbols may be the bridge between science and imagination in interstellar contact. Mathematics might describe the universe, but images invite empathy. Should we ever receive a message from elsewhere, decoding its geometry will require not only logic but cultural humility. The first dialogue between our worlds, they say, will be artistic before linguistic. In anticipating that possibility, our designers rehearse empathy on a cosmic scale, ensuring that curiosity remains our defining trait rather than conquest. Meanwhile, Earth itself becomes a gallery of planetary self-portraits. From satellites, deserts resemble brushstrokes, city grids glow like circuits. Environmental scientists use data visualization as moral language, turning temperature maps into living warnings, transforming numbers into symbols of urgency. A red line on a graph becomes a planetary scar, galvanizing movements more effectively than speeches. Once again, the power of the image transcends rhetoric, proving that emotion, when guided by knowledge, can steer civilization away from apathy. In space museums, children trace the outlines of mission insignias with reverence once reserved for relics. Each patch tells a story of collaboration. Nations once divided by ideology now sharing orbit and oxygen. The children see that science too has its liturgy, rituals of launch, return, remembrance. When they design their own emblems in workshops, they unknowingly continue humanity's oldest practice, transforming wonder into pattern. Their sketches predict futures not yet built, reminding adults that imagination remains our most renewable fuel. Philosophers of futurism discuss the ethics of awe. They warn that as achievements grow monumental, humility must grow proportionally. Symbols help maintain that balance. They distill greatness into gratitude. The icon of a blue sphere floating in darkness, the famous Earthrise, became perhaps the most moral image of the 20th century. It taught a planet divided by borders to see itself as singular. That photograph's enduring power proves that sometimes one symbol can rewrite an era's conscience more effectively than 1,000 treaties. Engineers designing habitats for Mars inscribe subtle motifs inside modules, circles signifying unity, patterns inspired by ocean waves to remind colonists of home. Psychologists advise that these visual cues sustain mental health by linking isolation to belonging. The art becomes infrastructure. In environments where silence is endless and gravity weak, symbols provide weight, the reassurance that meaning accompanies us even into exile. Humanity thus extends its oldest survival tool. Narrative encoded in form. Cultural theorists predict that future space travelers will carry digital archives of Earth's artistic symbols alongside scientific data. They imagine a cosmic museum accessible through holographic libraries, preserving everything from cave etchings to internet memes. Visitors could trace the evolution of human thought from pigment to pixel. This act of curation serves a deeper function. By remembering how we once searched for meaning, we safeguard our capacity to create it anew, even on alien soil. Theologians of the modern era interpret cosmic exploration as a continuation of humanity's spiritual geometry. The rocket, the orbit, the spiral galaxy all mirror sacred diagrams of ascent and return. Yet the intent has matured. Discovery now carries moral restraint. The language of conquest gives way to stewardship. The emblem of the future explorer may no longer feature flags but open hands, a universal pledge to learn without dominating, to expand without erasing. The cosmos becomes cathedral and science, its quiet liturgy of observation. As telescopes capture the oldest light in the universe, humanity confronts its reflection on a cosmic scale. The more we learn, the more the unknown expands, urging humility over hubris. Each new image, nebula, exoplanet, black hole, acts as both revelation and mirror. Our symbols evolve accordingly, less about control, more about connection. In the end, the mark we leave among the stars may not be physical at all, but ethical. A legacy of curiosity guided by conscience, a pattern of respect shining faintly across eternity. In the new millennium's dusk and dawn, symbols flow faster than speech. They cross borders in milliseconds, dissolving the distinctions that once separated artist from audience, prophet from programmer. A hand gesture filmed in one country becomes a global emblem overnight. A logo redesigned in one city becomes protest art in Seoul, another. The world, more connected than ever, redefines literacy, not as the ability to read words, but to read signs. The question grows urgent. Can a civilization that shares images but not understanding sustain harmony amid the noise of infinite meaning? Cultural historians observe that power now lies in the ability to frame perception. Nations craft visual narratives as carefully as they once drafted treaties. Propaganda evolves into subtle choreography, color palettes, typefaces, emotional resonance measured in milliseconds. Analysts call this the semiotic battlefield, where influence is fought not with armies, but aesthetics. Yet amid this tension, another current emerges. Independent creators reclaim symbolism for empathy, using Zha's design to bridge communities. In every viral poster or documentary graphic, there is a quiet resistance, the belief that truth can still be beautiful. Anthropologists studying migration note how diasporas weave hybrid symbols, blending memory and modernity. A refugee's tattoo echoes the geometry of both homeland and déjà hope. A festival banner unites scripts from multiple languages. These composite emblems become living archives of survival. They prove that identity, though fractured, can be reassembled into art. The fusion of styles tells a deeper story, that belonging is no longer tied to territory, but to shared emotion. In this new aesthetic, compassion becomes the most universal design principle. Economists tracking consumer behavior find similar patterns. A brand's logo once represented ownership. Now audiences demand authenticity. The minimalist trend. Sweeping design reflects a deeper hunger for transparency. Simplify the line, reveal the intent. Paradoxically, the cleaner the image, the more it must signify. Sociologists describe this phenomenon as the quiet convergence, the subtle harmonization of global taste through digital repetition. An emoji typed in Tokyo carries the same sentiment in Toronto. The shared shorthand of feeling begins to shape culture more efficiently than diplomacy. Yet danger lurks in simplicity. When emotion is standardized, nuance can vanish. Scholars warn that uniform symbols may flatten diversity. To preserve richness, future education must teach not only recognition, but interpretation, the ability to question meaning before accepting it as truth. In art schools from Berlin to Sao Paulo, instructors revive the study of symbolism as ethical literacy. Students examine ancient codices alongside interface design, learning that every visual system carries moral implication. Their projects merge calligraphy with coding, fresco with algorithm. Critics hail this synthesis as the rebirth of humanism in digital form. The movement insists that progress requires continuity, that to design for the future responsibly, one must first honor the past. Within those studios, history hums beneath neon light, whispering that creativity is conscience made visible. Philosophers of media call the current era the threshold of reflection. Humanity stands between spectacle and self-awareness, oscillating like a lens focusing on its own reflection. Each generation must decide whether to wield imagery as mirror or mask. The suspense of our century lies not in technological novelty, but in moral intention. Will the next universal symbol unite or divide? The answer, philosophers argue, depends on humility, the willingness to see beauty not as dominance, but dialogue, not as possession, but participation in meaning itself. Global policymakers increasingly consult cultural scientists when crafting international campaigns. Climate accords adopt earth-toned logos meant to evoke shared stewardship. Human rights initiatives choose circles over flags to emphasize inclusivity. The semantics of shape become diplomacy in miniature. In conference halls, designers and diplomats speak a common language of line and proportion. These subtle agreements, invisible to most, form the quiet infrastructure of peace, the realization that harmony begins in how we visualize one another before we legislate our futures. Meanwhile, filmmakers and storytellers use symbols to forecast moral evolution. Their speculative narratives depict society's rebuilding after information collapse, discovering that survival requires a new code of honesty encoded in art. Audiences respond not just to plot but to pattern, the symmetry of redemption, the geometry of trust. Cinematic light replaces cathedral light, yet the effect is the same: revelation. As credits roll, viewers feel what ancestors once felt under stained glass, an unspoken recognition that meaning, however fragile, remains our most sacred inheritance. And as the decade turns, a quiet realization spreads across studios, think tanks, and classrooms alike. Symbols have never been mere decoration. They are decisions made visible, intentions crystallized in form. Humanity's challenge now is not invention but integrity, ensuring that the signs we share mirror the values we claim. The suspense of civilization continues in every brushstroke, bite, and broadcast. What image will the future hold up as proof of who we were? Perhaps, in that final reflection, we will recognize not power, but perspective. At the edge of the digital century, every surface has become a canvas. Buildings pulse with light patterns that respond to weather. Drones trace choreography across the night, and wearable devices glow with data that maps our moods. We stand surrounded by messages of our own design, so many in fact, that silence itself begins to feel symbolic. Curators of future archives warn that the next crisis may not be scarcity of information, but excess of imagery. When everything means something, can anything still move us? The question hangs, luminous and unresolved. Historians of culture sift through the detritus of the 21st century's visual flood: logos, memes, holograms, digital graffiti. What they seek is not aesthetics, but intention. Beneath the noise, they trace the same impulses that animated cave walls and cathedral domes: the human urge to witness itself. Their findings read like poetry disguised as data: repetition of circles for unity, triangles for aspiration, spirals for growth. Despite new tools, the grammar of wonder remains intact. Progress, it seems, is merely the widening of a pattern first drawn in dust. Philosophers propose that the next stage of civilization may be interpretive, not technological. After centuries of creation, the world turns inward, asking why it creates. In think tanks and retreats, scholars imagine councils devoted not to invention but meaning, forums where artists, scientists, and citizens examine the ethics of the signs that shape behavior. They predict that humanity's survival may depend less on discovery than on discernment, the ability to read the symbols we already live within before they dictate futures we did not intend. Psychologists describe a phenomenon called symbolic fatigue. People bombarded by icons begin to crave authenticity more than novelty. They seek marks that feel earned, not engineered. Handwritten letters reappear, imperfect and sincere. Local artisans revive forgotten motifs as antidotes to homogeny. The pendulum swings back toward intimacy. In imperfection, audiences rediscover trust. The suspense of art shifts from spectacle to sincerity, the quiet thrill of realizing that meaning need not be vast to be true, only honest to endure. Technologists respond by designing algorithms that fade rather than shout, interfamshin, guess that learn when to be silent. The most advanced systems now practice restraint, displaying less to reveal more. Engineers call this the aesthetics of absence. A blank screen between notifications becomes a breath, a pause for reflection. The irony is exquisite. After centuries of striving to make machines speak, we finally teach them to listen. In that hush, some hear the faint echo of humanity reclaiming its own attention. Environmentalists reinterpret symbols of progress through the lens of ecology. The circle, once emblem of infinity, now reminds us of planetary limits. The color, green, regains gravity, stripped of marketing gloss and restored to living truth. Architects design structures that read the sun, breathe with wind, and trace water. Patterns as prayer. Each blueprint becomes a vow that civilization, if it is to endure, must synchronize its geometry with the rhythms of the earth that birthed it. Sustainability becomes not trend, but theology of design. Writers craft new myths to match this awakening. Their stories replace heroes with communities, conquest with restoration. The central motif is no longer the ascent of one figure, but the balance of many voices. Readers find suspense not in victory, but in reconciliation, the moment a fragmented world recognizes itself whole. Literature becomes cartography of conscience, mapping the terrain between knowledge and kindness. The ancient purpose of narrative returns, to remind us that survival, without understanding, is merely existence postponed. Sociologists document how digital generations turn collective experiences into living symbols. Online memorials, collaborative artworks, global fundraisers, all transform empathy into event. These shared rituals prove that meaning scales with participation. The spectacle of unity, millions connected by cause rather than consumption, suggests that humanity's most potent emblem may be cooperation itself. In a world weary of division, the simplest image, a circle of hands,